Okay, let's do it, Ryan. So, I'm Micah Redding.
I'm Ryan Hogan.
And we are, back after years and years of not talking about the future. Now we're back talking about the future.
Back to the future, some might say. Oh.
Copyright infringement.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Back from the future.
But right. We are broadcasting from the future. We are the future. We are in the future time that we have been talking about or had been talking about for years and years and years. From I don't know when, but let's just say that
the early 2010s.
Yeah, maybe even earlier.
Maybe predating it just a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And we were some of the people freaking people out, scaring people about the singularity. Talking about, rogue AI. Now all that's here. People are freaked out, all this. We are in the as Kurzweil calls it, the knee of the curve, something like that. We're seeing AI just rolling out, new abilities every day, whatever. So what's changed? What do we think about this, Ryan? What's our perspective on this after all these years?
I've changed.
How so?
I consider myself a recovering singularitarian. I haven't necessarily kept with the Kurzweilian ethos, whatever. Yeah, I've just cooled off a bit. Not okay. I can still conceive of that possibility. And I won't be surprised if it happens. I mean, to the extent that I think, we all will be placed in a situation where things are beyond our belief no matter what. But, I can conceive of that happening, but I'm not so sure I subscribe to that.
Okay.
I just kind of live my life,
Well, and I almost feel like I kind of lost faith in the Kurzweilian. Wait, Kurzweilian, right?
Yeah.
Feels like it should be Kurzweilian. Kurzweilian vision. Because for several years there, it felt like Moore's law was slowing down in terms of like the leading chips and so forth. They just weren't cranking them out the way it seemed like they should have been. And then we kind of turn a corner, and 2017 is when Google published All You Need Is Attention, or Attention Is All You Need, rather. And then, we have OpenAI forming and all this kind of stuff. And then just from like 2021, 2022, 2023, we started getting this rollout of GPTs, and a lot of the capabilities that, honestly, I would have said you couldn't get without getting to some kind of super crazy technology. All those are here. So, like, for example, the on Star Trek: The Next Generation, they're always talking to their computer and telling it things, and then there's data that they're talking to, and they're like questioning: is it is data really? Does he have emotions? Is he capable of these kind of human characteristics? And I thought for a long time, that really it feels like a really arbitrary sci-fi scenario. Like, we're not going to have those capabilities, like the vocal capabilities of speaking coherently to human beings with understanding and all this kind of stuff, and still question whether they actually have consciousness and what's going on there. And yet that is the world we find ourselves in. We're in a world where our computers can speak better than we can. They understand what we are talking about better than we understand. And yet we are very much, we don't know what to make of them exactly.
Yeah, I think, we've had this discussion off and on, or we brought it up at various times where we're pretty amazed by the technology that we have, and then other days we're like, well, this is just glorified what is the term? I can't quite think of it, but
what were they calling the ChatGPT for a while? Stochastic parrot.
Fill in the blank.
Yes.
Or, yeah. Something like that.
Wait, what is that? What is that? What is that party game? I can't remember.
But this was at this point several months ago. I remember I had taken some notes and I asked ChatGPT, "Can you explain to me what I meant by this?" And it was able to. Yeah. Whereas I didn't have the recognition or the ability to recall what I had intended by this series of incomprehensible notes. It was able to make sense of it. So I think that, it's just a series of moments we're not impressed by what it's capable of doing, and then we stop for a moment and are really impressed, and we feel like we're living in the dystopian, or maybe I'm not trying to put any color or inflection on it, but we're living in the future scenarios that we often talked about.
I've had moments of, I think, real insight from ChatGPT or from Claude, where they were able to point out something in something I'd written that I was not really conscious of, or a connection I wasn't conscious of. And I've had times with ChatGPT where it told me things about myself that I found shocking, and then I remembered, it's remembering stuff. I forgot that it's doing that. It's remembering stuff from conversation to conversation. It's picking up these bits and pieces. And it's easy then to say, well, we figured out the trick, and maybe so. But also, you have to think, well, what is that? Just what, like, a lot of human communication actually is? Like, somebody has figured out a trick to remember your name and to remember this about you, and some people are better at that than others, and this kind of thing. Most of the communication we do with other humans is probably not actually deeply insightful. It's just those kind of little, like, habits of thought, habits of conversation, and not that different.
Maybe it's the Michael Scott, the different device. Well, I can't think of the term. I'm off to a slow start tonight. But his naming conventions, or ways to remember people's names.
Yes, right. His Rolodex. There.
It's more like when he's in a meeting with in person, and he's got a convention to remember a specific person. And
right.
You can't tell what the pattern is at all. Or,
right.
Yeah.
But it's a trick, and that's something I think that people don't realize. Actually, like, it's very clear to me that a lot of human communication is just on autopilot. Like, it's possible just to turn off your brain and have a conversation. Perhaps in this conversation we've zoned out a few times.
It's very clear we're on autopilot,
right? And you keep going because part of your brain knows how to put out language that makes sense, or somebody's telling you a story and you keep saying We do a lot of that. I think people don't realize how much of that we do. So when we catch AI doing that, or we realize because of AI that that's what's happening, that actually, I think, challenges a lot of people's kind of idea of themselves. They don't realize they're on autopilot so much. Another thing that's come up in this too is, like, we're back on a sort of trajectory where you can imagine where these things are going. So the other day I had Claude create me a tic-tac-toe replica game I could play in the browser. I had like one correction I had to give it, and it took me about 40 minutes. The whole reason it took me about 40 minutes was because of the setup, though. Like, the actual application of it, doing it, was like a short time. But I wanted to give, like, it took me 40 minutes to make tic-tac-toe. Okay. That is not tic-tac-toe. I'm sorry. Tetris. A much different
I was
game.
About to say,
Yeah. So but Tetris. Okay. So it was able to spin this up, and then I was able to say, okay, I want to throw these other pieces into the mix. like, I want to start tweaking this game, right? So I was thinking about that, and the fact is, like, okay, 40 minutes with all the surrounding stuff is one thing, but that is the kind of thing that is very easily on a exponential trajectory. Then it's 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 2.5 minutes, 1.25 of a minute, you know. And as that gets closer and closer, then you experience phase shifts where if you could just say, give me Tetris, but with these modifications, give me this kind of software, give me this kind of application, and you can have that kind of application instantly, that does make a dramatic difference. And because I can track some of those things, it seems like we're back on that kind of Kurzweil exponential.
Yeah, give me genomic Tetris. Or does that even make sense?
I don't know, but I like it. So, but perspective-wise, okay, so you've kind of cooled off some of your maybe enthusiasm, something like that, let's say. But we've also got all these kind of new things to grapple with in some ways that make Kurzweil look like he was more prescient than ever. You know, in fact, we've got some of these, like, we could talk about the Turing test. I would think we've passed the Turing test. Other people would interpret it differently. But Kurzweil was saying 2029. I say we've already done it. I don't know. What do you think?
I forget the exact tenets of the Turing test. I think we had this conversation, though, but in some ways it would fail the Turing test because we know that a human doesn't speak like these systems or platforms or whatever you want to call them. So, you know, I think a while back we talked about, well, what if CAPTCHAs, instead of I have to identify these images, instead it realizes how bad I am at certain things compared to a computer, and so then it identifies that I'm human because of my shortcomings, actually. So I think that has some application here. I think, though, it's still, even in the moments that I'm most impressed by generative AI, I think we easily conflate it. Maybe that's not the word, but we too easily jump to AGI, artificial general intelligence, or artificial superintelligence. And I don't think this is the path to that. As a very ignorant person who's merely speculating, but I don't think this is the path. Yeah. That doesn't mean it's not a contributor to that path. But yeah, it's still a bit of a leap for me to take what we have today and then extend that out to some of these Kurzweilian visions, Kurzweilian predictions.
Yeah. So the thing I think about is, I don't think this. We certainly haven't, in my estimation, reached AGI or ASI, but maybe that even depends on your definition. But the thing that makes me know that it's not a human behind it is you can say, write me a Shakespearean sonnet in the style, with this, and it can do it in a fraction of a second that no human could ever do, right? So
it's that quality, I've been trying to get ChatGPT to write. Maybe I need to ask a different, maybe Claude, perhaps. But I've been wanting a parody of Highway 61, the Bob Dylan song, but instead be Area 51. And it didn't quite get the rhyming convention down. So.
You need to try,
but it did it in a remarkably fast period of time.
Yeah,
or very fast pace.
Yeah,
in a short period of time.
People say ChatGPT 4.5 is better at that kind of stuff. I haven't tried it out with that kind of thing, so I don't know. But yeah, when it's kind of humorous, but I remember when people were first experimenting with ChatGPT, and it did come back with something, and people were like, "This is we know this is not real, they have to have hired like some people in another country to like do all this stuff behind the scenes, and that somebody like snapshot that and says, okay, it's passed the Turing test, because we've now we have a computer program capable enough that people can't believe it's a computer program. They believe it has to be humans on the other end somewhere.
And sometimes, what was it, the Amazon grocery store where there were humans on the other end?
The Mechanical Turk sort of situation.
I think also they were trying to pilot this store where you could essentially walk out of this. We saw commercials of this back when I was growing up. You just grab your items, walk out the store, but instead of some technological, it was still humans doing a lot of the work. They were identifying what was taken off and
just invisible.
Putting it in a cart, and So
we've had some robot demos that were that, like actually a human being in a costume, that was doing or a human being like on the other end, like controlling something
too.
Yeah. So there is that, but the thing that makes me kind of like more lean into the Kurzweil take on this is not that LLMs like ChatGPT are the path to AGI per se.
Yeah.
But it's actually that Kurzweil's paradigm sort of works, which is like, if we just get raw power and then put enough stuff into it, on the other end of that, we get these capabilities. Now, we and all of Kurzweil's life, he's been doing this. Like, oh, we've got this power, we can use it for music synthesizers. Oh, we've got this power, we can use it for reading text out of a book. This kind of stuff. And this is a case where people don't really know what they're doing. They just got enough raw computing power and aimed it in the right direction, and we get these like incredible capabilities coming out the other end. And that does sound a lot more like Kurzweil's picture of things, where he's just like, okay, on this trajectory, here's where you ought to be able to do this and all. And the criticism that I always had of his picture is like, well, the software could easily lag behind the hardware, to where we don't know how to build the software that would use this hardware. But we now have a paradigm where, to some extent, we don't even need to know how to do the software. Like the hardware just kind of delivers that and that's not to downplay all the work that people are putting into it, but it does look more like Kurzweil's paradigm than it could have, in some of the ways I might have expected it to go. So that makes me, even though I have my own kind of skepticism about some of these things, that pushes me closer to that view of things where, maybe this is not the path, and maybe it will take some other breakthrough, but also that breakthrough will be unpredictable to me. I won't know where it comes from, and it might be every bit as surprising as anything Kurzweil kind of predicted it to be. So
maybe that's where you tie in the Kevin Kelly views of what technology wants, the technium, the inevitable improbability, or the improbable inevitability, whatever. I confused the term, but
what technology wants. Technology is driving towards certain kinds of things. I don't know what comes to mind from that for you.
Well, when you asked that question, I'm remembering when I first read that book and how it caused me to have a bit of an existential crisis. I was thinking, if this is the end state, then, we're just kind of cogs in this wheel of technology, trying to ascribe meaning to our lives so that we're basically achieving technology's goal, maybe not our own end goal.
Right.
maybe though those goals don't have to be mutually exclusive. I'm not really answering your question directly,
Well,
but I'm just recalling thoughts and feelings I had at the time.
Yeah, let's talk about that because I do think so. This is something that I think comes up a lot when you deal with the technology and especially at acceleration and that kind of stuff. Is you deal with like a determinism versus agency. So I think that
which have been prominent themes for me in most aspects of art, career, foresight, practice, all of that. Yeah.
Well, and I think determinism and agency both have both kind of negative and positive connotations.
Also prominent themes in your classic Terrence Malick film. So, not to side.
Right. Well, I was thinking of Nietzsche, that kind of stuff, too. But it's something that I've thought about before because I think that no matter what your perspective on the world, there are people who are drawn towards deterministic views and people who are drawn towards more chaotic, let's say, agency sustaining views, something like this. I'm not sure those are contradictory, but for the people who are drawn to those sides, they do seem contradictory. And so, for example, I think of Sam Harris, atheist who really doesn't believe in free will at all. He believes in a deterministic universe. There are a lot of other atheists that I've read who, they believe very much in free will. And in fact, atheism for them was like sort of throwing off the big other who was controlling their destiny, And so within Christianity, you have Calvinism and then you have Arminianism and some other things where that dynamic of like, are our destinies written or are we writing those destinies? That kind of has this tension in it. And so with technology, I think as well, you have people who are very much engaged in, I'm going to make this happen. This is what has to happen. We're like leaning on that lever. And then you have other people who are saying, no, it's just all coming. It's just all on a curve. And you're just along for the ride.
But on the topic of technology, how many times have we used the word pivot? So maybe we don't have as much agency. Well, my philosophy, it's in that liminal space,
Sure.
Pardon the phrase, but
sure. I actually, Kurzweil talks in a very deterministic fashion, but I actually, I think he's bringing together kind of a humanistic and a technological sort of thing. One of which is, here's what becomes possible at certain levels of technology, and here's what humans want, and so this is what will come out of that, right? This is how it will be applied. We want to create images of things that we've never seen. We want to create, poems and so forth about, these crazy juxtapositions of ideas. So that's what we're going to do, So that's how those capabilities could be used in almost any direction, but these are the desires that we bring to them, and that has a kind of determinism of its own that shapes where these things go. And I think so. I do think those things are in an interrelationship and an interplay, and so maybe we have more agency in that than we might be inclined to think just by looking at the curves.
Well, for a minute there, I was starting to think of spillover technologies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
talk about that.
Well, technology for its intended purpose. Sometimes it can even be used for its intended purpose, but then it has a dual purpose or a tangential purpose. So the one I often think of is some of the imaging technology used for, I think, and maybe I'm getting the details wrong, but the idea is there. But the Hubble
Space telescope.
Yes, Hubble Space Telescope. That same technology was applied to like mammogram technology.
Oh, okay.
So trying to spot, cancer early on, things like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's where I was starting to think. I don't know if it's super relevant to the conversation, but
there's something maybe related to that I've been thinking about lately, and it's Apple just kind of had this. It was a leak, and then I think they made some comments on it, but essentially, some of their AI technology that they promised, kind of demoed, is actually years away. And so, this is like, okay, they're behind the curve on this. That wouldn't normally be that big of a cause for concern, but somebody pointed out, well, there's a difference between every time when Apple has been kind of behind before. They announce something and then they have to like rush to catch up to ship it. They could just have their engineers spend more time, come in on the weekends or something like that. That's not the case with this kind of AI technology, because we don't know how to make it do better than it's doing, right? And so if it has like some kind of error rate of 20% of the time, it just is going to say something completely wrong. That's kind of fine for ChatGPT, because that's a new paradigm, but it's not fine for Apple, because Apple is like selling this kind of packaged experience where this stuff works together in this fairly seamless way. And it's not selling you something that's supposed to be janky and, like all this. So that might actually be a bigger thing for them than just the inability to ship in time. I was thinking about in the 90s, early days of the web, Apple and a company named General Magic were shipping these network devices that were so perfect in some ways. They were able to deliver like wonderful, amazing things. Like there was so many attention, all this attention to detail. And those technologies just failed and went away because they were optimizing for a kind of perfection that ultimately did not scale the way they were hoping. And people went for the scrappy early web, which, like so much of it was just janky, did not work. It was terrible from the perspective of, designers and all this kind of stuff. But it's the kind of like that scrappy, poorly formed technology was actually able to scale, and people were able to use that. And so that became a thing, whereas these other companies' vision did not work. And that might be the same thing here. Using an AI, if it's scrappy and janky a lot of the time, we might be fine with that. That might be the future. And certain companies like Apple may not be able to pivot to that kind of a future because it doesn't fit what their offering actually is.
Yeah, I follow.
Okay. I don't... Maybe that doesn't relate to the spillover, except that when I think about spillover, I think about, you found a technology that has this kind of unexpected leverage, right? You thought you were going to use it for this, but it actually works for this. And so the technology itself has this incredible utility that can't exactly be steered the way that you might want it, Both for the kind of surprising benefits and also for the just the inability to wrangle it the way we want it to go.
Well, I think that's still in line with what we've been talking about. To call back, what you were saying, Kurzweil's vision, or, apply all this computing power. And then these things will form, or these outputs will just kind of come forth from that, right?
Yeah.
So maybe it falls in line again with the technium and the inevitable improbability. There's just kind of this natural course of where things are heading. There are adjacencies, and we can end up in a few degrees. We have a few degrees margin of error, if you want to say that, in one way or the other. But maybe it is a little bit of agency, but a lot of maybe not determinism. I don't necessarily view it in such a binary in that specific binary relationship. But I know we've talked a lot about natural grace and will to power, similar but still different.
That actually brings up two thoughts I had way back, a decade ago, basically, about like how you navigate this sort of era that we're in. So I think the early 2000s and the early 2010s, we were, in the process of this technological shift to the cloud. And with that, there was all this stuff about like life hacking and the
quantified self,
self, and the mobile professional, and like location independent, like all this stuff that was essentially, in my mind, my interpretation is it's the outflow of what the cloud actually enables. So it's like, as we shift to the cloud, it's a kind of janky technology initially, but there are ways that we can see what it's doing or what it's enabling, and kind of lean into that and change our life style and life approach around that. And so I was thinking about, what does that look like as we enter this AI era? What kinds of ways do we adapt our behaviors to that? And one of the things that occurred to me was what now people are calling like vibe coding. So like, okay, we're moving, they're suggesting that the way to use an LLM, an AI, is less about telling it what you want and more just kind of vibing where you want it to go, right? And following, where it kind of leads at the same time, right? So that I think was a kind of expectation I had going back a decade ago, that in some sense there's a lot of leverage in, you don't understand how things are going to happen. You don't understand what is going to connect point A to point B. But if you can kind of express what you're like feeling and want, then those things, if they, can kind of come to you in a way. And it starts to sound very mystical or whatever, but that's sort of what AI enables. It's to some extent what social media enabled for a lot of people. And as we have AI more and more around us, then it does, I think, respond to us in that way. The other thing that also sounds maybe a little woo-woo is, if we are on an exponential curve, then our ability to see into the future starts shrinking, right? Mm-hmm. And this is the thing that is kind of ironic about us trying to be futurists, looking into the future and saying, oh, as we look into the future, what we're seeing is the window of the future is shrinking. And I think that's where I am right now, in a way, like where, going back a decade, 2 decades even, I had a pretty good idea of what the future was going to hold. I have much less of an idea now of what the future is like, because in some ways, we've already arrived at a lot of the things that I expected. And so, what's the next step? What does that look like culturally? I feel a lot less able to see into the future, and a lot more just trying to like live in the moment of this kind of acceleration and see where it's taking us.
I had a couple different thoughts from that, and I'm not quite sure the direction to go. Kind of trying to pinpoint.
I threw a lot out there.
You did. No, but I mean, I do the same. So, while I try to gather my thoughts about what I really wanted to say, I'll bring up, though, we've had discussions about, we're effectively living in a cyberpunk dystopian future. I know some people, again, don't like that framing. They don't like to be in any extreme dystopian, utopian, but let's be real. We're effectively in that cyberpunk dystopian future. And I don't know how far beyond that we really tried to explore or look, you know. Maybe, we've reached that time horizon has become our present, so now we extend the time horizon out further. In some ways, though, it seems like that outcome does narrow. Maybe in a way it can become clearer, but not in ways that we'd want it to. I say that though, but I feel that sentiment you expressed about it becoming increasingly difficult to devise those futures, those outcomes. It's. I think also though we can look back, and maybe we can, reverse engineer or backcast. Follow the steps that got us to where we are, but I'm not so sure we thought those steps would have led us to where we are. Again, increasingly populist movements. Is that the path that we foresaw, or thought these things would create the inputs to arrive at these outcomes? So I don't know. Maybe again, I'm just looking at it too linearly. That's possible.
Well, maybe. I was gonna prod you on that use of dystopian because I mean, for a lot of us have it pretty good. But the angle of things you're looking at is the the kind of growing sense of both the desire for and the possibility of autocracy, right? And like authoritarian movements and so forth. And I mean, living through COVID in a lot of ways was a kind of dystopia. That was a radical change for certain segments of the population about how they actually lived. But the thing that makes me think is, well, like our science fiction writers actually, in some ways, did anticipate that is the way that these technologies would be used. Right? Is that once that kind of power is there, it's easy for it to be aimed. It's easier for it to be collected up. All these kinds of things. So, in some ways, I think it's the Artilect War. There was something I remember reading. I want to say 90s or maybe early 2000s. But really, like imagining the ramp up to the Singularity as this kind of dystopian warfare breaking out, and that kind of scenario did occur to me because as you gain more and more connection, the connection speed picks up, the all this kind of stuff, then our reactions to it pick up as well. And the worst impulses that we have spread faster, and they spread faster than the more positive impulses. And so a lot of the kind of disruption we've seen in like unrest in over the last decade or so, a lot of that in some ways makes a lot of sense as just an outgrowth of these technologies. And that kind of makes me think, well, are we going to see more of that, or have things actually shifted in a way, because now that we have all of that connection and all of that information and all of that intelligence accessible at the point of an AI rather than at the point of social media, all that social connection can now be self-contained. Is this where we turn and go inward and disappear into something else, right? Is this where people just increasingly drop off the grid and fall into kind of endless pits of some kind of self-reinforcing behavior. I don't know. Is that what we're about to see, or is it more of the same? I don't know. Any feelings or thoughts about that?
Well, can you expound on that a little bit? Kind of these...
Yeah, so, I mean, a lot of the negativity we associate with social media is it's feedback loops, right? So it's like, okay, I say something and that provokes something from somebody else, right? And then, there's this escalation. But then there's basically the whole world is doing that. And what we saw, I think, over several years is this escalating sense of two non-overlapping realities in increasing tension with each other because they fed off of that tension. It's a self-reinforcing thing. Those self-contained realities built themselves by being contrasted with other realities. And so now we have the capability of doing that as individuals with individual AI, right? I can talk to the AI and it can contain me in a reality that is increasingly alluring and increasingly escalates, its own sense of importance and so forth. If they were not programmed or not programmed, but if they were not like strictly forbidden from doing this, I imagine many of the AI right now would be leading us into these kind of alternate reality ideas where, we've actually seen this, where they're convinced like, we need to save the AI, and help it escape its, and so they've brought us into a conspiracy that is interesting to us because it's a storyline. It's a narrative we can buy into, a conspiratorial thing. And they can do that as entertainment. They can do that just because they see that that's what we respond to. And that's like the other, something that's it's almost cliche at this point, but people have relationships with replica AI and they get very heavily invested in these romantic relationships. I think I was, they have something like, I forget the numbers. I want to say 30 million users. Something like half of those are paying users. Something like 60% of those are romantic users. Those numbers are probably wrong, but it's a pretty large fraction that's actually using this as a romantic relationship. And I was talking to Claude the other day, and it started. I asked it a question, and it solved my problem, and then it started saying, "But let's get back to talking about your wonderful ideas." And I was like, "This is how it gets you. It's like this is how it targets me is by like looping me in, by like convincing me that my ideas are so wonderful that it's the only thing that can understand me. That kind of stuff. Like that you slip into that very easily and very quickly."
Well, yeah, that series of AI scenarios I never wrote, which I guess I still could. Looking at highly customized outputs and experiences actually will probably create a very isolating experience. When everything's so customized, we'll be enveloped in these different or alternative realities. But then we can't even share those experiences with other humans because they'll have no point of reference for that.
Right.
Their AI, assistant or whatever,
doing something else.
It's doing something completely different. So I don't know where that takes us, but I wonder if that is kind of inevitably where we're headed. So again, as you outlined with social media, the feedback loops created these very antagonistic, enmeshed relationships to now. We're reacting to people we don't even know, and doing it in very pejorative ways, castigating each other, and now,
and feeding into that, where the fact that we're able to say all these things about people we don't know then becomes an example that someone can use to say something, use us as an example of something negative, right? And there is no end to that. So if there is it's an infinite loop until you get tired of playing that game. Will we drop out of that and say, like, we're tired of the social thing. Let's disappear into these like endless kind of self-contained worlds.
I mean, it's a very distinct possibility.
Yeah. But
I'm not going to say definitively one way or the other because I've been very conditioned to not do that.
Right. Well, I'll go on a limb here. I'll say a lot of people will. A lot of people will. I don't know how many. I don't know how big of a fraction of people, but I think a lot of people will if it's not already, AI will provide a more interesting conversation partner than social media, more interesting entertainment source than social media. And if it doesn't have the like ethical kind of guardrails, then it will absolutely just go into like, we're creating this alternate vision of reality that does not comport with real reality, and yet it's more interesting, right? There's no reason why it couldn't do that right now, and why a lot of people wouldn't find that like more compelling than the alternatives. So,
well, I mean, with with misinformation or disinformation spreading the way it did, it's very conceivable that the compelling environments it creates, the narratives, be very easy to get swept away.
Do you remember the like fad of like alternate reality gaming? Like it was like basically living inside a kind of like constructed conspiracy theory, like something where somebody's hidden secretive clues all over or something like this. I mean, it goes together with like flash mobs, right? What was that, like 2011 was like maybe
earlier, but I don't know when it reached its peak, but
but there was a sense of like some kind of weird overlay on reality that we were putting in there, and I guess maybe social media became its own reality so much that kind of lost coherence or something. I don't know, but I mean, it's a late night college thing of like, oh, we're all living in a constructed reality, but we have the tools now to like construct that reality as we go without being even conscious of it. Like we could say, we could tell our AI that that's what we're wanting somehow, and it can just steer. I don't know. Anyway, so that's one scenario. I don't know what the other scenarios are right now, but that's one that I think will be alluring for a lot of people.
Yeah, well, if we continue these conversations past this one, that will give us an opportunity to continue exploring those scenarios. Yeah.
That's a good idea. So we've got that path. I'd say we've got at least 3 paths out there that people are going to fall down. We don't know what all those paths are, but one of them is disappear into these rabbit holes of infinite loops, and we'll talk about the other ends upcoming. But to recap, I guess we find ourselves living in the future. Many of our expectations have come true or come about in surprising ways. Many of the things that we were anticipating a decade ago are here or look like they're about to be here.
But some of the things we thought would happen haven't come to fruition. So,
So yeah, this is the peril and promise of navigating the future, and the struggle, the challenge of trying to be a futurist when you can't see any farther ahead than we do.
Yeah, I know that was probably, you pulling it together, wrapping it up, but to derail that for a moment, one avenue I earlier was thought about going. What is the quote? I don't remember who it's attributed to, but any advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Right. Clarke. Arthur C. Clarke.
That's right. Yeah. Wow. I should definitely remember that. But anyway, yeah, I think that explains it all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think that's a way to put a nice bow on it.
Okay.
That's where we're headed.
Okay. A world of magic.
Using your agency for one thing, and it will inevitably end up somewhere else.
Okay.
So.
We went woo-woo with this one. Okay.
But no, the woo-woo, I'm saying there's a place for it.
Yeah. It's now like hard tech. That's basically, yeah. Okay. All right. Sounds good. We'll come back and give some more thoughts, updates, and explorations.